The conference room on Council Station Prime was filled with worried faces. 47 species had gathered here, and every single one of them knew they were losing the war. Ambassador Velthara stood at the center podium, her scales turning pale blue with stress. She had been speaking for nearly an hour, and the other council members were not happy with her suggestion. "You cannot be serious," Councillor Drexith said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Asking the humans for military help? They have been part of this council for only 5 years. They are barely civilized." Velthara pulled up holographic images on the main screen. Dead worlds, burning cities, millions of her people killed by the Krethic swarm. "Look at these images and tell me we have better options. 12 of our worlds are gone. The swarm is growing stronger every day. Our fleets cannot stop them. We need help and we need it now." Another counselor stood up. "The humans are dangerous. We have all read the reports about their history. They spent thousands of years killing each other. Their weapons are designed for maximum destruction. Their military tactics are brutal and efficient. This is not the kind of species we want fighting our battles. But they know how to win," Velthara replied quietly. "That is something we seem to have forgotten." The debate continued for hours. Some council members argued that bringing humans into the war would be inviting a different kind of threat. Others pointed out that without help, there would be no council left to worry about threats. Finally, the Supreme Arbiter called for a vote. The decision was made. They would ask the humans for help. 3 days later, Ambassador Kyle Morrison sat in his office at the Human Embassy, drinking his morning coffee. He had been expecting another boring day of paperwork and meetings that went nowhere. The Galactic Council treated humans like children who had stumbled into adult conversations. They were polite but dismissive. Kyle had learned to accept it. Then his communication console beeped with an urgent message. He opened it and started reading. His coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. He read the message again to make sure he understood it correctly. The Galactic Council was asking for military assistance. They were begging for it, actually. Kyle immediately contacted Earth Command. Within 2 hours, he was on a secure video call with Admiral Patricia Hughes, several generals, and the President of Earth. The faces on his screen looked as surprised as he felt. "They want us to fight their war," General Luis Martinez said. He was an older man with gray hair and skeptical eyes. "The same species that has been treating us like dangerous children now wants us to save them." Admiral Patricia Hughes leaned forward. "Let me be clear about what they are offering. Full technology exchange. That means access to everything they know about faster-than-light travel, energy weapons, and medical science. They are also offering territorial rights to several systems near Earth, and they will give us permanent seats on their High Council. This is not just about helping them. This is about making humanity a real power in the galaxy." "What is the enemy like?" President Claire Bishop asked. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes who did not make decisions lightly. Kyle pulled up the files he had received. "The Krethic swarm is unlike anything the Council has faced before. They do not negotiate. They do not take prisoners. They do not even seem to want territory in the normal sense. They just consume everything in their path and move on to the next target. Think of them as space locusts. The Council has tried diplomacy, economic pressure, and defensive warfare. Nothing has worked. How many ships do they have?" Admiral Hughes asked. "Current estimates suggest over 10,000 vessels, and the number is growing. The Krethics reproduce quickly and build ships from biological material. Every world they consume gives them more resources to make more ships." General Martinez whistled low. "And the Council has been fighting these things for how long?" 8 months, Kyle replied. "They have lost 12 worlds and hundreds of billions of civilians. Their projections show complete collapse within 6 months if the current trend continues." The President looked at each person on the call. "If the Council falls, eventually the swarm will reach Earth. We might buy ourselves a few years, but the threat will not go away. The question is whether we fight now as part of a coalition, or later when we are alone and the enemy is even stronger." "There is another consideration," Admiral Hughes added. "This is our chance to prove ourselves to the galaxy. For 40 years we have been the new species that everyone watches carefully. They see our weapons and our history and they worry. If we help them win this war, we become valuable allies instead of potential threats." General Martinez nodded slowly. "We would need to send our best people. This is not a training mission. If we commit to this, we need to win decisively." "I agree," the President said. "Admiral Hughes, begin preparing the fleet. I want our most experienced commanders ready to deploy within 72 hours. And contact Colonel Jacob Warren. If we are going to war, I want our best tactical mind leading the operation." "Yes, ma'am," Admiral Hughes replied. Kyle felt a strange mix of excitement and worry. Humanity was about to enter its first interstellar war. Everything would change after this. "What should I tell the Council?" he asked. The President looked directly at him through the screen. "Tell them that Earth accepts their request. Tell them we will send military forces to assist in the defense against the Krethik swarm. And tell them that when humans go to war, we go to win." The call ended, and Kyle sat alone in his office for a few minutes. He thought about what was about to happen. Humanity had reached the stars hoping to find peace and knowledge. Instead, they were about to show the galaxy what thousands of years of warfare had taught them. He wondered if the Council really understood what they had asked for. Probably not, Kyle thought. But they would learn soon enough. He composed a formal response to the Council and sent it. Then he started making calls to coordinate with Earth Command. Ships would need to be prepared. Troops would need to be briefed. Supply lines would need to be established. There were 1,000 details to manage, and every one of them was critical. On Earth, Colonel Jacob Warren received the call while he was reviewing training exercises. He was 41 years old and had spent his entire adult life in the military. He had fought in 3 major conflicts and dozens of smaller operations. He knew war in ways that most people could not imagine. "You want me to lead an expedition into unknown territory against an enemy we know almost nothing about?" he said to Admiral Hughes. "Yes," she replied simply. "When do I leave?" 48 hours. You will have command of the first strike force. 20 ships, best crews we have. Your job is to assess the enemy and find their weaknesses. Once you report back, we will send the main fleet." Jacob nodded. "I will need complete operational freedom. No interference from the Council. If I'm going to fight this war, I fight it my way." "Understood. I will make that clear in the operational orders." After the call ended, Jacob sat in his office and thought about the challenge ahead. The Council species had evolved beyond aggressive warfare. They fought carefully, trying to minimize casualties and follow strict rules of engagement. That was why they were losing. The Krethiks did not care about rules. They only understood strength and violence. Fortunately, humans understood both very well. Jacob began planning the operation. He would need good intelligence, flexible tactics, and weapons that could overwhelm enemy defenses quickly. The Council fought like chess players trying to think several moves ahead. Jacob planned to flip the board over and set it on fire. The galaxy was about to learn an important lesson. When humans were asked for support, they did not send peacekeepers or advisors. They sent warriors who had been perfecting the art of war for 10,000 years. The Krethik swarm had faced the civilized species of the galaxy and found them weak. Now they would face humanity, and humanity had never learned to be civilized about warfare. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Thelos system. Colonel Jacob Warren stood on the bridge of the USSC Valiant, watching the tactical displays update with new information. What he saw made his jaw tighten. The situation was worse than the reports had suggested. "Give me numbers," he said to Lieutenant Commander Lisa Grant at the I navigation station. Reading approximately 300 Council ships in defensive formation around Thalos Prime. The Krethiks have about 800 vessels at the system edge, and more are arriving every few minutes. Lisa looked up from her console. "Sir, they are outnumbered almost 3-1. "Then we better even the odds," Jacob replied. He opened a communication channel to the Council flagship. "This is Colonel Jacob Warren of the Earth Forces. We are here to assist." The screen flickered and Admiral Velthera appeared. Her reptilian features showed obvious relief when she saw him. "Colonel Warren, your timing is excellent. We were beginning to think you would not arrive in time. The swarm will attack within the hour." "I need tactical command of all human vessels," Jacob said directly. "And I need authorization to operate independently within your defensive perimeter." Velthera hesitated. Her scales rippled with uncertainty. "That is against our protocols. All forces must coordinate through Central Command to maintain proper defensive coverage." "Your protocols are why you are losing," Jacob said, keeping his voice calm but firm. "I did not come here to follow you into defeat. Give me operational freedom or my ships will withdraw immediately." The alien admiral stared at him for a long moment. Finally, she dipped her head in what Jacob recognized as submission. "You have authorization. Please try not to destroy any of our ships while you are being independent." "I will do my best," Jacob said and cut the connection. He turned to his crew. "Lisa, I want complete tactical analysis of the Krethix formations. How do they move? How do they communicate? What are their patterns?" For the next several hours, the human crews watched the ongoing battle. The Council forces fought exactly as Jacob expected. They maintained tight formations, focused their fire on isolated enemy ships, and tried to minimize their own casualties. Every move was calculated and predictable. It was textbook defensive warfare, and it was completely ineffective against an enemy that did not care about losses. Captain Ryan Foster commanded the destroyer USSC Hammer, positioned near the Valiant. His voice came over the communication channel. "They fight like they are afraid to take risks. They are evolved past aggressive warfare," Lisa explained. "Their entire civilization is built on consensus and careful decision-making. They calculate odds before every action. Then they have calculated themselves into extinction," Jacob said coldly. "Send the signal to all human ships. We execute Protocol Havoc in 5 minutes." Protocol Havoc was something Jacob had developed specifically for this kind of fight. It was based on a simple principle that the Council would never understand. Sometimes chaos was more effective than order. Sometimes the best strategy was to make the enemy think you had no strategy at all. When the 5 minutes ended, the human fleet scattered. Ships broke formation and moved in seemingly random directions. On the Council flagship, Admiral Velthara watched in horror, thinking the humans were panicking. Her tactical officers reported confusion in the human formations. Then the Krethix Vanguard entered weapons range, and everything changed. The USSC Valiant launched a spread of missiles that looked standard on Council sensors. They were not standard at all. Each missile contained an artificial intelligence program that could identify command vessels, ignore decoys, and adapt to defensive fire. Humanity had learned these techniques fighting each other for centuries. Now they used them against an alien enemy. Captain Ryan Foster's destroyer accelerated directly toward the Krethix line. Most Council captains would never do something so aggressive, but Ryan was not a Council captain. His ship launched dozens of small drones that began jamming Krethix communications across a massive area. The swarm's coordination collapsed almost immediately. Then the railguns opened fire. The Council considered kinetic weapons primitive. Why throw metal when you could use energy beams? But humans had perfected the art of throwing metal at incredible speeds. The tungsten rods fired from human railguns moved at a significant fraction of light speed. When they hit Krethix bioarmor, they punched through it like paper. Each impact released more energy than a nuclear explosion. "Multiple targets destroyed," Ryan reported, his voice calm despite the chaos. "Engaging next wave." The Hammer's computer systems identified and destroyed 17 Krethix cruisers in less than 2 minutes. The other human destroyers were achieving similar results. The swarm had never faced this kind of firepower or these kinds of tactics. On the Valiant, Jacob watched the tactical display with satisfaction. Second wave, execute flanking maneuver. Third wave, prepare nuclear package. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Grant hesitated. "Sir, the Council has strict prohibitions against nuclear weapons in fleet battles. They consider them excessive force." "The Council is not winning," Jacob replied without looking away from the display. "Launch on my mark." 3 human frigates moved above the Krethix formation and released their payload. Fusion warheads wrapped in cobalt shells detonated in sequence, creating overlapping zones of radiation that sterilized space for thousands of kilometers. Any Krethix ship caught in those zones simply ceased to function. Their biological systems could not survive that level of radiation. For the first time in 8 months of war, the Krethix swarm retreated. They pulled back from Thalos system, leaving behind hundreds of destroyed vessels. The Council forces had not lost a single ship in the engagement. On the Council flagship, Admiral Velthara stared at her displays in disbelief. Her tactical officers were running the numbers again and again, unable to accept what they showed. In less than 30 minutes, the humans had accomplished what her forces could not do in 3 weeks. They had made the swarm afraid. "What kind of species are you?" she whispered. The next day, Jacob met with Velthara and several other Council admirals in a secure conference room. The aliens looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and fear. He understood both emotions. "Your tactics were effective," Velthara admitted, "but they were also brutal. You used weapons we have banned for centuries. You took risks that could have resulted in massive casualties. But they did not result in casualties, Jacob pointed out. My forces achieved a decisive victory without losing a single ship. Can you say the same about your previous engagements? The room went silent. Everyone knew the answer to that question. You must understand, another admiral said. We have evolved beyond such aggressive warfare. We believe in proportional response and minimizing collateral damage. That is fine when you are fighting an enemy who shares those values, Jacob replied. The Krethiks do not. They do not care about proportional response or collateral damage. They only understand strength. If you try to fight them with one hand tied behind your back, they will kill you. So you suggest we abandon our principles? Velthara asked. I suggest you decide whether you want to keep your principles or keep your civilization, Jacob said bluntly, because right now you cannot have both. The meeting ended without full agreement, but Jacob did not care. He had not come here to make the council comfortable. He had come here to win a war, and he was going to win it using every weapon and tactic humanity had developed over 10,000 years of constant warfare. Later that day, Admiral Patricia Hughes arrived from Earth with the 2nd Expeditionary Fleet. 50 capital ships emerged from faster-than-light travel and took up positions throughout the sector. Each ship carried weapons that made council observers quietly recalculate their assumptions about human military power. Patricia met with Jacob in his ready room. The council is nervous, she said. 3 species have formally protested our use of nuclear weapons. They are calling for restrictions on human forces. Let them protest, Jacob replied. How many ships are they contributing to the next offensive? None. They are maintaining defensive positions only. Then their opinions do not matter, Jacob said. He pulled up a star map showing Krethik's territory. We need to stop reacting and start attacking. The swarm is building up forces here, here, and here. I want to hit them before they can launch their next offensive. Patricia studied the map. That would require penetrating deep into enemy territory. The council would never approve such aggressive action. I am not asking for their approval, Jacob said. You gave me operational command. I intend to use it. Patricia looked at him carefully. Do not start a war within a war, Jacob. We need the council as allies. Then make sure they understand that allies support each other, Jacob replied. I am going to hit the swarm where it hurts. The council can either help or stay out of the way. Admiral Hughes left the meeting with mixed feelings. Jacob was right about the tactical situation. Defensive warfare would not win this conflict. But his aggressive approach was creating political problems that could undermine the entire alliance. Still, she had chosen Jacob for this mission because he was a winner. And right now, winning was more important than politics. Back on the Valiant, Jacob continued planning his next operation. He had proven that human tactics could defeat the Krethiks. Colonel Jacob Warren spent 3 days planning Operation Steel Curtain. The name came from an old Earth military campaign, and it fit perfectly. He was going to drop a curtain of steel and fire across Krethik's territory, cutting off their supply lines and destroying their forward bases. The council did not know about the operation yet. Jacob had learned that asking for permission meant waiting for committees to debate and vote. By the time they reached a decision, the tactical situation would change. So he decided to ask for forgiveness later instead of permission now. Are you sure about this? Captain Ryan Foster asked. They were reviewing the operational plan in Jacob's ready room. We will be 50 light years deep in enemy territory with no support. If something goes wrong, we are on our own. Nothing will go wrong, Jacob said with more confidence than he felt. We hit fast, we hit hard, and we get out before they can respond. The Krethiks are not used to enemies attacking their rear areas. They will not know how to react. And if they do know how to react, then we adapt, Jacob replied simply. That is what humans do best. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Grant entered the room carrying a data pad. I have the final navigation calculations. 14 jumps through systems the Krethiks do not monitor heavily. It will take us 2 days to reach the target, but we should arrive undetected. What about the return trip? Ryan asked. That depends on how much attention we attract, Lisa said with a slight smile. I have 3 different exit routes planned. We can choose based on enemy response, Jacob nodded approval. Good work. Brief the other navigators and make sure every ship has the complete route. He looked at both of them. I know this is risky. But every day we wait, the swarm grows stronger. We have a chance to cripple their offensive capability. We have to take it, Ryan stood up. Then let us go make the council nervous. The strike force consisted of 20 ships, all human vessels with experienced crews. They jumped into faster-than-light travel in coordinated sequence, leaving the council fleet behind without explanation. Admiral Velthara would be furious when she discovered they were gone, but Jacob would deal with that later. The journey through hyperspace was tense. Every time they dropped to normal space between jumps, sensors scanned for Krethix patrols. Lisa's navigation was perfect. They avoided every major enemy concentration and slipped through gaps in the swarm's defensive network. On the second day, they arrived at their target. System designation KX-77 on human charts. The Krethix called it something else, but Jacob did not care about names. He cared about the massive asteroid field in the center of the system. Intelligence had identified it as the primary staging ground for Krethix operations in 3 sectors. Reading multiple contacts, Lisa reported as the fleet dropped to normal space. Hundreds of Krethix vessels under construction or being loaded with supplies. This is definitely their main supply hub. Jacob studied the tactical display. The asteroid field was enormous and nearly every large rock had been converted into some kind of facility. Ship construction bays, supply depots, troop barracks. It was a complete forward operating base, and destroying it would cripple Krethix operations for months. All ships weapons free, he ordered. Target priority is construction facilities first, then supply depots, then warships. Burn it all. What followed was not a battle. It was an execution. The human ships moved through the asteroid field like sharks through a school of fish. Railguns tore apart construction facilities before the Krethix workers could even respond. Missile pods seeded the area with autonomous mines that hunted for any vessel trying to escape. The few Krethix warships that attempted to defend the base were overwhelmed by coordinated fire from multiple directions. Commander Helen Price commanded the destroyer USSC Tempest. She specialized in close-quarters combat and had volunteered for the most dangerous part of the operation. Her ship dove deep into the asteroid field, weaving between rocks while her point defense systems shot down incoming fire. I have multiple capital ships under construction in my sector, she reported. They are about 70% complete. Should I disable them or destroy them? Destroy, Jacob ordered. We are not here to take prisoners or capture assets. We are here to send a message. Helen's ship unleashed a barrage of missiles that turned the construction bays into expanding clouds of debris. 6 Krethix capital ships that would have been operational in a few weeks were now just wreckage. Target destroyed, she confirmed. Moving to the next cluster. For 6 hours, the human fleet systematically destroyed everything of value in the system. Every construction bay, every supply depot, every ship that could not escape. When they finally withdrew, the Krethix staging ground looked like the aftermath of a natural disaster. Thousands of years of accumulated resources were gone in a single afternoon. The fleet jumped away in scattered directions as planned, each ship taking a different route back to council space. 3 Krethix patrol groups tried to intercept them, but the humans used electronic warfare and decoys to slip past. Every ship made it back safely. When they returned to the main fleet, Admiral Velthara was waiting. She had requested an immediate meeting with Jacob, and her message indicated she was extremely unhappy. Jacob took his time getting to the conference room. Let her wait a little longer. When he finally arrived, Velthara was pacing back and forth. Several other council admirals were present, and all of them looked angry. Good, Jacob thought. Anger meant they were paying attention. You launched an offensive operation without authorization, Velthara said immediately. You violated council protocols and risked starting a diplomatic incident. I destroyed a major Krethix supply base and crippled their offensive capability in 3 sectors, Jacob replied calmly. You are welcome. That is not the point, another admiral said. You acted unilaterally. This is supposed to be a coalition effort. Then maybe the coalition should start acting instead of just reacting, Jacob said. How many meetings did you have while I was gone? How many debates about proper procedures? I will tell you what I did. I went into enemy territory, destroyed critical infrastructure, and came back without losing a single ship. That is what winning looks like. Velthara's scales turned dark red with frustration. We cannot operate this way. There must be coordination and planning. I agree, Jacob said. So here is the plan going forward. Human forces will continue offensive operations against Krethix strategic targets. Council forces will maintain defensive positions and protect civilian populations. We each do what we do best. You are asking us to trust you with no oversight, Belthara said. I am telling you that oversight costs time, and time costs lives, Jacob replied. Every day we waste in committee meetings is a day the Krethiks use to rebuild and prepare their next attack. I am offering you a chance to win this war. The question is whether you are willing to accept that victory might not look the way you want it to. The room fell silent. The council admirals looked at each other, and Jacob could see them struggling with the decision. They wanted to maintain control. They wanted to preserve their protocols and procedures. But they also wanted to survive, and Jacob was offering them survival. Finally, Belthara spoke. We will discuss this and provide a response. You do that, Jacob said. Meanwhile, I will be planning the next operation. He left the conference room and returned to his ship. He knew the council would eventually accept his terms. They had no choice. The alternative was losing the war, and even the most protocol-obsessed species would choose survival over procedure. Back on Earth, Ambassador Kyle Morrison was dealing with the political fallout. The council had filed formal complaints about human military operations. Several species were demanding restrictions on human forces. It was a diplomatic nightmare. They want us to save them, but they want us to do it politely, Kyle said to Admiral Patricia Hughes during a secure communication. It does not work that way. I know, Patricia replied. But we need to maintain the alliance. If the council turns against us, we lose access to their technology and their territory. That would be a strategic disaster. Then help me give them something they can accept, Kyle said. Jacob is winning the war, but he is losing the peace. We need a compromise, Patricia thought for a moment. What if we establish a joint command structure? Council oversight of strategic objectives, but human tactical freedom in how we achieve those objectives. They get to feel like they are in control, but we get to actually win battles. Kyle nodded slowly. That might work. I can sell it to the council if you can sell it to Jacob. Jacob will hate it, Patricia said. But he is a good soldier. He will follow orders. 2 days later, the compromise was presented to both sides. The council accepted it with relief. Jacob accepted it with obvious reluctance, but agreed to make it work. A joint command center was established, with council strategists and human tactical officers working together. It was not perfect, but it was functional. More importantly, it allowed the war to continue with human forces leading offensive operations while the council maintained political legitimacy. The Krethik swarm, meanwhile, was beginning to understand that something had changed. Their easy advance had stopped. Their supply lines were being disrupted. Their forward bases were being destroyed. For the first time since the war began, they were being pushed back. 3 months into the war, human forces had pushed the Krethiks back on every front. But the victories came with a cost. The medical frigate USSC Mercy was working around the clock treating casualties from the front lines. Dr. Elizabeth Torres had not slept more than 4 hours in any single night for the past 2 weeks. She moved between operating rooms with practiced efficiency, treating burns, decompression injuries, and radiation exposure. Every day brought new wounded, and every day she saved as many as she could. We have another transport incoming, Nurse Danny Hill called out. 8 critical patients, 20 with serious injuries. Elizabeth did not look up from the soldier she was working on. Put the critical cases in surgical bays 1 through 8. I will get to them as soon as I finish here. One of the wounded was Lieutenant Scott Palmer, a fighter pilot who had been providing close air support for a council ground force. His fighter had been hit by Krethik's bioweapons and the damage was severe. His left arm was destroyed and he had burns across most of his body. Doc, am I going to make it? He asked through the pain medication. You will be fine, Elizabeth said firmly, though her medical scanners told a more complicated story. But your flying days are over for a while. Did we save the colony? You always save the colony, she assured him. Now be quiet and let me work. Later, in her quarters, Elizabeth allowed herself a rare moment of rest. She pulled up casualty reports from across the fleet. 217 dead, 463 wounded. Numbers that would shock the council but that were considered acceptable by human military standards. She thought about Scott Palmer and the others like him. Young men and women who had volunteered to fight in a war that was not really theirs. The council worlds were not their homes. The civilians they protected were not their families, but they fought anyway, because that was what humans did. Meanwhile, Colonel Jacob Warren was planning the operation that would end the war. Intelligence had finally located the Krethix core world, the heart of their civilization and the command center for their entire swarm. It was 50 light-years deep in unexplored space, protected by more ships than any human force had ever faced. "It is suicide," Captain Ryan Foster said bluntly when Jacob showed him the plan. "We would be lucky to reach the outer system, let alone the planet itself. That is why we are not taking the whole fleet," Jacob replied. "Small strike force, 20 ships, fast insertion, hit the command structure and withdraw before they can respond." "You keep saying small strike force like that makes it better," Ryan said. "Jacob, there are thousands of Krethix ships defending that system. 20 human ships will not be enough." 20 ships is all we need," Jacob insisted. "The Krethix operate on a hive mind structure. Every drone, every ship, every soldier is connected to the central intelligence on the core world. If we destroy that intelligence, the entire swarm becomes mindless. They will stop being an organized military force and become just individual ships with no coordination. And if you are wrong, then I die trying," Jacob said simply. "But I am not wrong. Every piece of intelligence we have gathered supports this conclusion. The core world is the key to winning the war." Ryan was quiet for a moment. "When do we leave?" 48 hours. I need you to command the hammer on this operation." "You know I will follow you anywhere," Ryan said. "Just try not to get us all killed." Admiral Patricia Hughes approved the mission, though she clearly had doubts. "You understand this is a one-way trip if anything goes wrong," she told Jacob in private. "I understand," he replied. "But someone has to do it, and I will not ask anyone to take a risk I am not willing to take myself." "That is what worries me," Patricia said quietly. "Come back alive, Jacob. That is an order." "Yes, ma'am." The strike force launched 3 days later. 20 ships, all volunteers, all experienced crews. They jumped through 14 faster-than-light transitions over 2 days, carefully avoiding Krethix patrol routes. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Grant navigated them through the most dangerous space in the galaxy with perfect precision. When they finally arrived at the core world system, every screen showed the same terrifying image. Thousands of Krethix vessels filled the space around the planet. Capital ships, cruisers, destroyers, fighters. It was the largest concentration of enemy forces anyone had ever seen. "I am reading over 3,000 capital-class vessels," Lisa reported, her voice steady despite the odds. "Plus, countless smaller ships. This is their entire home fleet." "Then destroying it will hurt even more," Jacob said coldly. He activated the fleet-wide channel. "All ships execute Protocol Ghost. Radio silence from this point forward. If you get separated, you are on your own. See you on the other side." Protocol Ghost was humanity's answer to impossible odds. Do not fight them all. The ships activated stealth systems, powered down everything except essential functions, and drifted into the system on minimal thrust. They were small enough and quiet enough to avoid detection in the massive fleet. For 30 hours, they coasted deeper into enemy territory. Every sensor contact looked like discovery. Every Krethix patrol that passed nearby made hearts race. But the human crews maintained perfect discipline. They had trained for this. They knew how to be patient. Finally, the core world came into view. It was a massive planet covered in organic structures that looked more grown than built. The entire surface pulsed with bioluminescence. Energy readings suggested the planet itself was alive in some way. A massive organic computer that controlled the entire swarm. "That is our target," Jacob confirmed. "All ships, load nuclear packages, full strategic yield. We are going to burn this world." Commander Helen Price, commanding the Tempest, armed her ship's weapons. "All missiles ready. Multiple firing solutions locked. Waiting for your order, sir." Across the strike force, every human ship prepared the deadliest weapons in their arsenal. Not the tactical nukes they had used in fleet battles, but strategic fusion devices designed to destroy continents. Each ship carried enough firepower to devastate a planet. "On my mark," Jacob said quietly. watching the countdown timer. 3, 2, 1, execute. 20 ships dropped stealth systems simultaneously and launched everything they had. Hundreds of missiles streaked toward the core world's surface. The Krathik's defenses responded immediately, but they were too slow. Most of the missiles penetrated the atmosphere before defensive fire could stop them. The first warheads detonated across the planet's surface. Cities burned, command centers melted. The biological structures that housed the swarm intelligence began to die. More missiles arrived and more after that. Within minutes, the entire planet was covered in nuclear fire. All ships, emergency jump, Jacob ordered. Go now. The strike force scattered, each ship jumping to different coordinates as thousands of Krathik's vessels converged on their position. The swarm was screaming, every ship in the system racing toward the humans. But they were too late. 3 human ships did not make it. They were caught by concentrated fire before their faster-than-light drives could engage. The crews fought to the last moment, buying time for their companions to escape. Their sacrifice would not be forgotten. 17 ships jumped away to safety, carrying with them the knowledge that they had just committed genocide against an entire species. In space around the core world, the effect was immediate and dramatic. Krathik's ships suddenly stopped coordinating. They began moving in random patterns, some attacking each other, others just drifting. The hive mind was dying, and with it, the swarm's ability to function as a military force. Across every front in the war, the same thing happened. Krathik's fleets, that had been attacking Council worlds, suddenly became disorganized and ineffective. Without central coordination, they were just individual ships with no purpose. The war was over. Humanity had won. But the victory felt hollow to Jacob as he sat in his quarters aboard the Valiant. He had just destroyed an entire civilization. Billions of lives ended in nuclear fire because he had ordered it. The fact that it was necessary did not make it easier to accept. There was a knock on his door. Captain Ryan Foster entered without waiting for permission. He sat down across from Jacob and said nothing for a long moment. "We did what we had to do," Ryan finally said. "I know," Jacob replied. "That does not make it right." "Maybe not. But it saved the Council. It saved Earth. That has to count for something." Jacob nodded slowly. "History will judge whether we made the right choice. For now, we live with it." They sat in silence, 2 soldiers carrying the weight of a decision that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Outside the window, stars drifted past, indifferent to human guilt or human victory. The galaxy had learned what humanity was capable of when pushed to war. Now everyone, including humans themselves, had to learn to live with that knowledge. The destruction of the Krathik's core world ended the war in a single day. Across the galaxy, swarm forces became confused and disorganized. Without their central intelligence, they could not coordinate attacks or even navigate properly. Council forces easily contained the remaining ships, and within a week, the threat was over. But the aftermath was complicated in ways no one had expected. Ambassador Kyle Morrison stood before the Galactic Council High Assembly, reading a carefully prepared statement. The chamber was full, every species represented. Some looked grateful. Others looked horrified. All of them looked at humanity differently than they had before the war. "The human government acknowledges the necessity of the core world strike," Kyle said, his voice carrying across the chamber. "We also acknowledge the moral weight of such an action. The decision to use weapons of mass destruction was not made lightly." Counselor Drexith stood up, his voice angry. "You committed genocide. You exterminated an entire species. How can you stand there and call that necessary?" "We ended a war that was exterminating you," Kyle replied calmly. "The Krathiks had destroyed 12 of your worlds and killed billions of your civilians. They showed no signs of stopping. How many more worlds would you have sacrificed? How many more billions would you have let die?" The assembly erupted in debate. Some species praised humanity's decisive action. Others condemned it as barbaric. The Kixian collective, whose worlds had been saved from destruction, remained notably silent. They understood better than most what humanity had done for them. Finally, the Supreme Arbiter called for order. The Council acknowledges that human intervention preserved our civilization. The technological exchange and territorial agreements will be honored as promised. However, there will be conditions. Kyle waited, keeping his face neutral. Human military forces will be restricted in Council space. The Arbiter continued. Your weapons technology will be subject to oversight and regulation, and humanity will accept Council observers to ensure compliance with our warfare conventions. Kyle felt anger rise in his chest, but kept his voice calm. In other words, you want us to remain your attack dogs but kept on a short leash. We want assurance that humanity's capacity for violence is properly controlled, the Arbiter said. Controlled by whom? Kyle asked. The same council that was losing a war 3 months ago? The same council that could not stop the Krethiks until we arrived? He shook his head. Here is what Earth will accept. Full voting rights on the High Council, unrestricted access to all galactic trade routes, and complete military autonomy within our own territory. In exchange, we will continue to honor our alliance and respond to mutual defense requests, but we will not be controlled. That is unacceptable, Drexith said firmly. Then reject it, Kyle replied with a slight smile. Earth does not need the Council. We proved we can survive on our own. The question is whether you can survive without us. The chamber went silent. The truth was undeniable. Humanity had become the most powerful military force in the galaxy, and they had done it in less than a year. The Council could either accept humanity as an equal partner, or they could face future threats alone. The Arbiter considered for a long moment, then nodded slowly. The Council will deliberate and provide a response within 1 week. Kyle knew they would accept his terms. They had no choice. Fear was a powerful motivator, and the Council was very afraid of what would happen if humanity became an enemy instead of an ally. Later that day, Kyle met with Colonel Jacob Warren in a private room. The colonel had returned from the front lines and looked older than his years. The weight of his decisions showed on his face. The Council will accept our terms, Jacob said without preamble. They are afraid of us now. That was always going to happen, Kyle replied, pouring them both a drink. Fear is easier than respect. Do you think we did the right thing? Jacob asked quietly. Destroying the core world, I mean. All those lives. Kyle was silent for a moment. I think we did what was necessary to survive. Whether it was right is something people will debate for centuries. But those people are alive to have that debate because of what you did. It does not make it easier to live with. It is not supposed to, Kyle said gently. The day it becomes easy to kill billions of people is the day we stop being human. Back on Earth, Admiral Patricia Hughes stood in a Pentagon briefing room, presenting the final war analysis to the Joint Chiefs and President Claire Bishop. The room was quiet as she went through the numbers. Total human casualties, 412 dead, 833 wounded, she reported. Council casualties would have exceeded 10 billion without our intervention. The Krethik swarm has been eliminated as a strategic threat. Remaining isolated groups are being contained by Council forces. President Bishop studied the reports carefully. And the political situation? Complicated but manageable, Patricia replied. We have gained significant influence, but we are also seen as dangerous. The Council will work with us, but they will never fully trust us. Can we live with that? We will have to, Patricia said. We have crossed a threshold. Humanity is no longer a minor species on the galactic stage. We are a major power now, for better or worse. The president nodded slowly. Make sure our people understand that this was not conquest. This was survival, ours and theirs. On the medical frigate Mercy, Dr. Elizabeth Torres finally allowed herself to rest. The casualty wards were mostly empty now, with patients transferred to proper facilities. She sat in the observation deck, watching stars drift past, and thought about the cost of victory. Lieutenant Scott Palmer had survived his injuries. He would never fly a fighter again, but he would live. He would go home to his family. That had to count for something in this war. Elizabeth had saved hundreds of lives during the conflict. But she also knew that she could not save everyone. Some injuries were too severe, some battles were too brutal. The war had taught her the limits of medicine and the resilience of the human body. She wondered what the galaxy thought of humanity now. They had seen humans at their most effective and most terrifying. They had watched humans take an impossible war and win it through sheer aggression and advanced weapons. Would they remember the lives saved or only the lives taken? Captain Ryan Foster returned to his family on Earth, stepping off the transport to find his wife and 2 children waiting. The reunion was emotional and joyful, but his daughter, who was 8 years old, looked at him with questions in her eyes. "Daddy, are you a hero?" she asked. Ryan knelt down to her level. "I did my job, sweetheart. Sometimes that meant doing hard things to protect people. The news said you helped destroy a planet." He took a deep breath. "Yes, we did. Because if we had not, many more planets would have been destroyed by the enemy. Sometimes there are no good choices, only less bad ones." His daughter thought about this for a moment. "Did you save people?" "Yes," Ryan said firmly. "We saved a lot of people." "Then you are a hero," she decided, and hugged him tightly. Ryan held his daughter and tried to believe that she was right. Colonel Jacob Warren never returned to active combat duty. He took a position at the Joint Strategic Command on Earth, training the next generation of officers. He taught them tactics and strategy, but he also taught them about the cost of war, about the weight of command decisions, about living with the consequences of necessary actions. He never spoke publicly about the core world strike. When reporters asked, he simply said it was a classified military operation. But late at night, when sleep would not come, he would stand at his window and look up at the stars. Somewhere out there, a planet was dead because he had ordered it. Billions of lives ended in nuclear fire because he believed it was necessary. History would judge whether he was right. For now, he just had to live with the decision. The Galactic Council eventually accepted humanity's terms. They had no real choice. Within a year, Earth had 5 permanent seats on the High Council and had become one of the most influential voices in galactic politics. Human ships patrolled trade routes. Human advisors helped other species upgrade their militaries. Human technology began spreading throughout Council space. Ambassador Kyle Morrison remained at Council Station Prime, becoming one of the most skilled diplomats in the galaxy. He understood that power without diplomacy was tyranny, but diplomacy without power was just begging. He walked that line carefully, making humanity respected rather than just feared. Years passed. The war became history. New generations grew up knowing only the peace that had been bought with violence. The Krethics became a cautionary tale, a species that pushed too hard and paid the ultimate price. One day, a young Kixian diplomat approached Kyle at a reception. She was the daughter of Admiral Velthara, the one who had first asked humanity for help. "My mother wanted me to thank you," she said quietly, "for saving our world." "Thank Colonel Warren," Kyle replied. "He did the hard work. I just handled the politics." "She also wanted me to ask you a question," the young Kixian continued. "Was it worth it? The price your people paid?" Kyle thought carefully before answering. "Ask me again in 100 years. Right now I am still too close to see clearly. And if I asked Colonel Warren, he would tell you that peace is always paid for with violence. The only question is who pays the price and when." The young Kixian nodded slowly, understanding.